everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Do Good to Lead Well podcast series. I'm your host, Craig Dowden. I'm an executive coach, keynote speaker, and passionate about the science and practice of positive leadership. Thrilled that you took the time out of your hectic schedules to join us today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be a lot of fun on a fascinating topic, lots of fantastic insights. For those of you who are new to the Do Good to Lead Well universe, whether you're joining us in the live audience or if you're listening to the podcast episode upon its release, a very warm welcome. For those of you who are veterans of the Do Good to Lead Well community, always great to have you with us. This podcast was generated in advance of my first book, Do Good to Lead Well, The Science and Practice of Positive Leadership. And I have the profound privilege to speak with best-selling authors, global thought leaders, researchers, TED speakers, top CEOs, you name it. And so what I wanted to do was broaden this conversation to a larger audience. And so because of your ongoing support, your social shares, your great guest ideas, your feedback, we are now ranked in the top 1% of podcasts globally. So this could not have happened without you. And the primary reason is because the amazing guests, and I'm going to provide a very brief bio so we can really dig into the conversation. A very warm welcome to Carissa Carter, who is a designer, geoscientist, and the academic director at the Stanford D School. She's the author of The Secret Language of Maps, How to Tell Visual Stories with Data. And for those of you who follow the podcast or follow me, you know I love data and evidence-based insights. And Carissa teaches design courses on emerging technologies, climate change, and data visualization. Her work on designing with machine learning and blockchain has earned multiple design awards, including Fast Company Innovation and Core 77 awards. So without further ado, Carissa, a super warm welcome to the Do Good to Lead Well podcast.
Thank you so much, Craig. I'm very excited to be here with you today.
Well, and I have to share this. That's so great. And for those of you listening, I'm holding up my physical copy of the book, which is beautifully designed and lots of fantastic content. And for those in the live audience, please take advantage of this opportunity to ask Carissa questions. And I already have one in the chat box already, which I'm excited to get to. But before we begin, talk to us about this phenomenal book, Assembling Tomorrow, A Guide to Designing a Thriving Future. What was your motivation behind penning this book?
Well, thank you for that warm introduction, Craig, and also congratulations on your podcast success. And thank you to everybody listening, because we believe that building a better tomorrow is really up to all of us. So the book Assembling Tomorrow, it's new. It's by me and my co-author, Scott Dorley, who's the creative director at the D School. It's about this phenomenon that we see happening in the world right now that we call runaway design. And what is that? Well, let's think about how today feels, just from a feeling standpoint. Okay, Scott and I are educators. We teach college students how to make things, how to make systems, how to make experiences, how to build with technology. And even to us, people that teach people how to create, the world feels pretty angst-ridden, right? It feels like a place of unease. We are living amongst algorithms that can think and learn on their own. Our climate's in dire straits. We're able to edit genetic code that can replicate and evolve, right? And it can really feel like all of this is happening to us. But we know, right, as makers, as educators, that we all have a ton of agency, actually. And so we wrote the book to both call attention to the urgency of the moment, but also to pave a path forward that any one of us can take on.
Well, and it's awesome. I love that. And I love how the subtitle is A Guide to Designing a Thriving Future. I think that's very cool. And the other piece around it is I really appreciate the context that you just provided, Carissa, because in my conversations, my personal life, my professional life, absolutely the world feels like an angst-ridden place, and it's
Mhm.
getting more and more. And I really love that focus on agency. And that's one of the many reasons I was excited to talk to you about the book. And right away, we have a question, and it's come in multiple. Before I even started, someone I know reached out and asked me a similar question. Amy has said, I'm so looking forward to this conversation. Can you please explain to me what is design thinking and how it applies in our world?
All right, let me tell you what design is. We have a very expansive view of design. An easy way to root it is to think about any object that you have around you. Now, objects are physical things that are designed, like I have a cell phone right here. Let me take that cell phone. This is a physical object that has been designed. On it, if I open up that cell phone, there's a number of digital apps on here, right? Each one of those is designed all the way down both to the visuals, to the flow through those applications. So design work can be product work, but every single one of the apps on this phone, right, enables any number of experiences to happen. I can, we're having a video call connecting people all over the world, right? That's in a designed experience. So there's products, there's experiences, and then those products and experiences are nested in any number of systems that are also designed. I get this phone from my employer, Stanford University. I'm a cog in that system. I have software on here that knows where this phone is, right? And that allows me to do certain things. That's a system that was designed. I have an AT&T phone plan. It decides where I get service in the United States, around the world, right? A system that was designed. If I want a new application, I go to an app store. There were rules about like what I can take from the app store, how that works, and how people that are creators can work with it. Design, product, experiences, systems. Powering all those things are technologies. If you were to text me, my name Carissa is often not in the Western canon of names and it will autocorrect. Okay, and I know some of you have an autocorrect name too. It corrects to carrot or carcass, right? And like you do it a few times and it learns. It will get Carissa because somebody, one, designed the data that's powering that algorithm, decided what to include and not include, but also how it works and how it learns. So if you
Mm.
think about it, design work is data, it's tech, it's product, it's experience, it's system. And all of those have many implications that are in the world, both near term and longer term consequences. So you open a can of worms, Amy, with your question as to what is design, because the reality, I should have given you the short answer, is like, look around. Everything has been designed, not necessarily well or intentionally, but everything's design work. And whether you consider yourself a designer or not, you may be designing the schedule for your kids in the day or a work meeting, right? All of that can be done intentionally.
Well, and again, I've got lots of comments coming in going, this is great. Love that definition, love that framing. And I really appreciate it because when we think about, as you say, design is everywhere. And also, which I think is so fascinating about the core idea that you're talking about in terms of designing our future, and that we are designers and we have those choices, and there is this intentionality to it and there is this agency. And that's why, again, when had the opportunity for us to have this conversation today, so excited because listeners to this podcast, be they executives, founders, aspiring executives, people looking to how to lead their personal or professional lives more effectively, we're all in the business of design,
We are.
and it's better to be intentional around it rather than just be at risk or at the influence of the forces. And so, which is a beautiful segue because I love how the book is designed. There are two core parts to it.
Mhm.
Number one, starting with the intangibles. And so I want you to double click on that, if you will, to talk more about the intangibles. And then you talk about the actionables. So again, for people who follow this podcast, they know I love talking about context and then what do we do with context. So this is perfect. So can you talk about the intangibles and how
Yeah.
they influence our design?
Yeah. So the intangibles make up that front half of the book. They are part one. This is where that unease in the world today comes from.
Mm,
And Scott and I paint four different intangibles here. Now, there are many, but two that really deal with forces happening outside of ourselves are one, the interconnection of everything, how interconnected everything is. I somewhat, talked about that when I was talking about my phone all the way down to autocorrect. You can see how each of those things is connected to the other. A second one is flow, right? And about how information flows, how really everything in our life flows and is subject to a notion that faster is always better that we
mm,
like to question and bring up. So interconnection and flow, but then also a couple forces that are within ourselves, both feelings, how our feelings spark both what we create and our reactions to what we create, as well as the human propensity for make believe.
mm.
And it's both something that we see as very important because you can't make anything unless you first imagine it. So practicing that art of imagination is really important, but also because we all are just only experience our own tiny slice of the world. And yet we often think we see the whole picture. So make believe, feelings, flow, and connections are our four intangibles.
Well, and again, thank you for that. And it's so powerful. And I love how you and your co-author essentially separate them, the external sides of the context and the internal sides of the context. And right away, not surprised, more questions. David said, really appreciate the make believe and how to see things to create. I've heard a lot around the power of visualization and visualizing your goals and then being able to achieve them. Is that connected with the idea you just shared?
Well, when you think about make believe, yeah, I mean, visualization could be a piece of that. There's a lot of ways that you can get to flex the skill of make believe. Storytelling is one, and that's something else that we do throughout the book, which is why I tease it here. We tell fictional stories throughout this book that bring you slightly into the future. Now, they're not far-fetched, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years in the future. They're maybe 10, 20 years into the future because when you imagine and you can take yourself out of some of the assumptions of today and actually craft a story that puts you in a moment, you start to like not only like vaguely think about what might be, but you start to think about some of those implications of how the technologies we're using can affect our relationships, can affect our feelings, can affect some of the more nuanced aspects of what we're going to be creating. So we use make believe as a tool for that.
Mhm.
And certainly visualization is one element of how to do it. There are many others too.
Right. No, and I think that's great. And again, thank you. Very helpful in terms of those insights, Carissa. And it's fascinating, and I love. I think there are 20 stories. Is that kind of the
There are 20 stories.
speculative?
Yeah.
Yeah, which
Hmm.
is great. And then to say, okay, what is a possible future or an imagined future? And it's really interesting to think about those connections. And I know it's one of the many reasons the book was very well received in terms of the phenomenal endorsements that you received. Now, what's interesting, and I want to dive a little deeper into this, you talked about those four intangibles, and I really enjoyed the chapters and the subtitles within the chapters. And one of your chapters is focused on feelings, and then
Hmm.
I just love the feelings shape the world even when we ignore them. And so if you can, because this podcast really is around, so how can we live our best lives personally and professionally? How can we better lead ourselves? And you could say design ourselves, if you will, to really flow with the great ideas in your book. Can you talk to us about that? Why are feelings such an important navigational force? And then also, as you say, they're gonna shape our world even if we ignore them. So let's dive into that.
Well, I mean, so we call it the circumstances, feelings, ideas loop, right? You will be in a situation, it sparks a feeling, and then there's a reaction that you have to it, and that reaction may give you new ideas. Those feelings have helped us to build the world that we live in now. There's a story of how our um, our strip malls, strip malls, how
Mm,
they came to pass was from this guy who's called C.L. Peckham, and he was driving around a block looking for a parking space. This is, where if we you know place this back in history, where like cars are like 1950s cars driving everywhere, but the idea of parking right in front of the store like just hadn't been in the public, in the way that we were building our architecture at the time. And um like as he's driving and driving, had like this frustration, right? There's that feeling, that's the trigger, that like I cannot find a place. Well, maybe I could create a place based on that feeling. And he then went on to draw up the first idea renderings for these mini malls. This is, I think I said 50s before, it was earlier, um, maybe 20s, 30s. And what then became to pass is we have strip malls where you can drive up and park now, right? And it's a simple example, but the reality is, yeah, that feeling sparked that idea, but also like, what do you think of strip malls now? They're pervasive. Some
mm.
people may love the access to them. They are places where a lot of small businesses are actually can thrive that big box stores haven't necessarily taken over. Also, they are thought of, maybe as like not as beautiful as other types of structures, etc. Everything has a positive and a negative, and you probably have your own feelings as to as about those types of places, right? Like that loop continues and continues. And so it's just really important to remember that whether or not like you're paying attention to that feeling, it is triggering a reaction of you in some way. Sometimes those things can get propagated.
Mm. No, this is great, and thank you. And then I've got a comment about two comments. One, I really enjoy strip malls, and someone else said, "Oh, sometimes they frustrate me." So there you go. You get the wide kind of
Well,
range.
yeah, right. Like that's a perfect example too of like our experiences. Like we think like our experience is often the experience, right? That's back to that make believe in our own lenses of seeing the world.
No, I love it. Well, and again, questions are coming in fast and furious. So I have one from Sean saying, I'm not sure if you can answer this. Is there a way for me to get better in touch with or decode my feelings and learn what they're trying to tell me?
Ooh, well, probably yes, Sean. um, I mean, I think like my simple, not a psychologist, answer to that, right, is to pay attention to how you feel on social media, right?
Mm,
Because social media is a more modern technology, right, that has really like research has shown how much it has polarized society, right? And like there was a period when a platform like YouTube, its only goal, right, was to, and this is like in the 2010s, I believe, to increase engagement at all costs, right? That was the headline goal of what they were trying to achieve. And so, of course, the algorithms were designed to keep you watching and watching and watching more.
mm,
What that meant, though, right, was that they weren't prioritizing for factually correct content or for content that may be harmful in one way or another. And so we saw those algorithms really pull people into like feelings of feeling like they have, one, they have this tiny community that believes the truth, believes conspiracy theories, etc. Right? And we do like it's one hand, on one hand we chuckle about it, but right, it has that type of misinformation is pervasive now. It's pervasive, and protecting people from being unnecessarily spun up feels
Mm.
like a responsibility of all of us. So I think, like, back to Tom's question of like, how do I check this in myself, is like, take a pause. Like, if you're engaging in social media, like, what's that, like, one beat pause as to like paying attention to the reaction that you're having before you make your next move.
Mm. No, and again, several comments here saying great stuff. Really appreciate the observations around social media. And I've got a follow up on that question around Chris saying, this is fascinating. Love the commentary on this. What are some ways I can design my social media usage so I can become less polarized or more open to the world around me?
Well, I think that's the question of our moment, right?
Yeah,
Because I
no
like it's
pressure. Yeah.
well, I mean, I think the reality, right, is there's stuff that you can do, Chris, right? And each one of us can do. But then there is also the elephant in the room, is the algorithms behind the technology that's powering what we are all seeing, those recommendation engines, the decision to show us what video we're going to see next, what our children see, etc. So this is a very, like, complicated topic that, you as a viewer, right? Unfortunately, it's on a lot of all of us to be fact checkers,
Mm,
to not assume that anything is true. We know that deep fakes are more and more pervasive. Like, it was a novelty a year ago, 2 years ago, right? It was, and we all saw like our first video of like, somebody talking that had, a fake voice, and it was like, that video is real. These technologies are so quickly evolving that
mm,
it feels commonplace. And so I think, just being highly aware of checking our sources, like, we're at a moment where that's on us.
No, and again, more comments about great insights. Really appreciate the conversation. And to reflect back, Carissa, I love, and again, it follows so nicely with the organization of the book into the two parts, which is, and maybe this is the bridge to the second part. It's the intangibles and then the actionables. And I love how you just set that up. And I think that's so powerful for all of us here joining live or listening to the episode, where it's, this is the context in which we're living. Social media, great example that you shone a light on, and then the algorithms that are at play. And so recognizing that is an intangible, it's part of the context. Now, and I love this point that you're making, is that now me as a consumer of that technology, of that environment, now I want to be mindful of how that makes me feel, how that makes me think, and how I'm going to use that insight to design how I'm
Mhm.
showing up. So I just love, I think that's just such a powerful way of framing and a powerful reminder for all of us in terms of the influence. And going back to a word which I love you talked about at the beginning, which is agency. And perhaps
Mhm.
I'll kind of leap over into the actionables,
Great.
because that's, and we may come back to the intangibles again. As I said, there are so many things that I enjoyed. The short stories, the speculative stories around the possible futures. The opening chapter in the actionables is around be awkward.
Hmm.
And so I would love for you to explore that idea when it comes to our actionables. One of the things that we can do, what is the power of awkwardness and how can we lean into that more so we can design our personal and professional lives more effectively?
Yeah, I've loved awkwardness for years. I'm one of those people that, you walk into a room, a situation, and something's off. Like,
Right.
that offness, for whatever reason, like it's a hook. And I think it's a hook for a lot of people that are um just like in tune with like the culture of a place or being out of place, and it's fascinating sometimes, and sometimes it's really uncomfortable. And so awkwardness as one of the actionables is really like one way to see the unseen. And
Mm,
really, like all of the actionables that we have are about that. It's how do you notice when you're in places that, you know, most of us spend our everyday lives in pretty much the same area. You don't move every single day, right? So you get used to things. You feel like this is how the world is. And in order to see these, you know, intangible forces happening, you have to throw yourself off a little bit.
mm,
And by being awkward, like by being awkward, by laying into that is one, by shape shifting or like changing what you're working on, what who you're collaborating with is another actionable. Disorientation is another one. Aiming for imperfection is the fourth one that we have. And all of these are, you know, there's different techniques within each of them, but they're all really about like seeing your environment in a way that you haven't otherwise, throwing yourself a little bit off kilter.
mm. No, this is, and again, great comments coming in, and got a follow up. So I'm not surprised. The question right away from Anne saying, loved your example from your personal life about that feelings of awkwardness. When I walk into a room, especially with people I don't know, I feel awkward. Any tips, tools, so I can design myself better to feel less awkward or benefit from feeling awkward?
Well, maybe, you know, maybe think of it as a like a mini research opportunity, right? Like when you walk into that and you feel that awkwardness, instead of necessarily trying to rid yourself of it right away, like just tell yourself, I'm going to give myself 30 seconds to figure out exactly what forces are causing it. Is it
Mm,
because, you know, there's a subculture here, everybody knows what's happening, and I'm the one that doesn't know the flow, I'm going the wrong way, I don't know how to get where I'm going? um is it because, you know, like you literally don't speak the same language? Maybe they're from one business unit and you're from another, and everybody's got their own jargon, right? Like there are so many reasons that that can be. Again, some of them may be from the situation and others may be from inside yourself. So is it an external, or is it an internal and tangible that is making that awkwardness happen? Where does it sit in your body? Is another thing that we like to talk about in class. Is it, you know, a lot of us feel it like in the gut, like kind of middle of your chest.
right.
There's a sweatiness to it. Are you the type of person that like wants to rush to make it go away? Do you see that as a power? Um, one thing we talk about a lot with our students is navigating ambiguity, and
Mm,
that is something that is important for everyone, very important in design work, in leadership. And it's not always about making ambiguity go away, right? We do not live in a world where there is one right answer. We live in a world where there are many possible ways to move forward. And so being able to engage with ambiguity and, you know, understand multiple ways forward and pursue them in parallel is critical. Like if you run a business, you know that that's the case, right? There's not just only one path. So, you know, awkwardness is kind of like the baby feeling that allows us to cope with this very big thing of navigating ambiguity.
mm. No, and this is again so many great comments coming through, and I love how you're talking about this, and in particular in terms of, and it's one of the things that I love hosting the podcast, speaking to extraordinary global thought leaders like yourself, that it sounds like once again there's this idea of curiosity, of approaching our lives with endless curiosity and non-judgment. As you just talked about, you're like, okay, where is it and how does it fit and how does it manifest? And so it's almost like, and I love that in the description for the book too, it's about novel experiments, and like it sounds as if it's we approach our lives as scientists, like, hey, let's go out and gather data and figure out what all this means for my own journey. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. It's in some ways too, it's part science and part imagination. And
Mm,
another activity that we have in the awkwardness section is called Name Your Monsters.
right.
And
Mm,
I love this because it references, or that it's inspired by the ancient monsters that were on old maps. So if you can picture like a very ancient map, they often will have a fantastical creature on there. It may look like part whale and part dragon, right? Like it's not true. It's worth knowing that those ancient maps are from like 1500s era, were used as encyclopedias more so than as navigational devices. So you think of that old map and it's really saying, here's everything we know about this space. The fact that there's that monster on there is not because it's like just like let's just toss a monster on there. It's a mix of there was likely a seafaring vessel that saw a fin go by, but they didn't know that that was a whale or a shark or what, they don't that they know that there is a creature there, but they don't necessarily know what that creature's intention is, what it does, or even entirely what it looks like. So by putting some rendering of it on the old map, what that monster is a representation of what we know, but also what might be.
right.
And what might be, it might be dangerous, but it might not be. And so when we do a name your monsters, it's like, well, what is the force that you see or the thing that you see happening in the world or your work right now that you know to be true? And what is that element of like concern that you might have for it? And we
Mm,
have people like literally draw it as a monster. And it's a freeing thing to draw this type of fantastical creature. Mine is this thing that looks like it's a giant ball with a drill bit on it because I am worried that our technology today is getting to a place where it knows me more than like better than I might know myself, and like are
mm,
my thoughts even my own?
right.
So
Wow.
like what is this monster that's like actually boring into me? And
Mm,
again, like it's a bit fantastical, but it's also based on truth. When you can externalize this, when you can draw it, when you can talk about it with others, it helps keep our concerns about where we're going like in the public psyche. And
mm.
that's really important, to not keep them inside, but to be able to make them something that we can all talk about.
Well, it's so interesting that you're talking about this. And again, it reminds me of the great work done around the power of naming our emotions and naming things. Like it's just such a beautiful parallel track around that because it really empowers us to be able to identify, to process, to figure things out, to share with one another, to learn, and also, as you say, just give it a life of its own, which is really awesome. I think that's just a great way to think about some concrete things that we can do. Another question coming in, and ambiguity, I'm not surprised, struck a chord. So Tara was saying, uh, feel like the world is becoming more and more ambiguous and multiple paths forward. What are some things as a leader I can do to grow my own comfort with ambiguity and also grow that comfort level in my team?
Yeah, a couple of my colleagues have done some research work on this, and Andrea Small and Kelly Schmoody, they even wrote a book about navigating ambiguity. And one of the frameworks within there, I think you'll find relevant to your question, Tara, which is to pay attention to how you are showing up in an ambiguous situation. Are you one like just enduring the ambiguity? Are you two um embracing the ambiguity, or are you three like engaging with the ambiguity? And there's differences between those three postures, And you're not only like one type of person. There may be moments where you do need to like you're waiting for a few different factors to settle and you just need to like wait it out and you need to endure. But there are excuse me, times when you do need to say like, okay, the situation's ambiguous right now because you know we're waiting on a market report from some industry I don't have control over when that's going to happen. Also, what's happening in our political context may be adding ambiguity to my work and how people can show up, and you don't have control over that, right? There may be many factors, and you would like to embrace that, right? And you actually use it as a tool. So like thinking through what like how you're feeling in a given moment and which way you would like to approach the ambiguity is often a great first step towards dealing with that in a way that is then inspirational to your team. And there's a bunch of techniques that the two of them share in their book as to like how you can pay attention to each of those three modes.
Well, and again, thank you. So many great insights there. And once again, it's back to that idea of framing, reframing,
Mhm.
intentionality, how we look at things, and then taking on that lens around, well, just as you were saying earlier, Carissa, about, well, there are multiple paths forward. Also thinking about there are multiple ways of looking at this situation. And then
Mhm.
also, and I love that idea of agency that you keep coming back to, and then choosing the one that best serves us in this particular moment, recognizing the context. I think that's just absolutely awesome. Another chapter title. I just enjoyed in some ways the counterintuitive. They make so much sense when you're reading just the counterintuitive side, because the last one in the section on the actionables is called aim for imperfection. And I just thought, now this is awesome. That this is like, it's not just be comfortable, it's like aim for it. Can you talk to the live audience, to listeners, what makes aiming for imperfection such a powerful approach when it comes to designing a thriving future for ourselves?
Yeah, so aim for imperfection, and then the little subtitle of that chapter is don't fix everything because everything breaks.
Right.
And and it does feel counterintuitive, but the thing to remember is that even no matter like anything that you put in the world, it may function as intended, but it will disrupt something else. It will break something else. There is actually a question that we ask our incoming graduate students at Stanford when they're being interviewed. Now, if you've made it to the interview round, you're really successful, right? You have a great portfolio. Like, so we're like in like the cream of the crop is being interviewed. And what we say to them, right, is like, tell us about, pick a project in your portfolio that they're very proud of. These are design students. And then like even talk about like if this is even more successful than it has been already, what does that look like? And they get really excited. They share it, like, oh, and this, you know, service that I've created now serves people all over the world, right? Like, and they are really talking about its success. We are great at talking about our successes. We all want our things to achieve and be helpful and like, solve people's problems. And then you ask them, okay, let's assume that success has happened. What have you broken along the way?
Mm,
And that's a moment where in an interview setting, you see how somebody unpacks that question and how they often unpack it. The ones that do that well, they start to think about like, if I have this wild success, here's the systems that I've disrupted. Here are the people whose because the new device that I've created makes people like able to get to work so much faster, right? Like no longer are they listening to podcasts on the way to work because they don't have time to anymore. No longer are they then like learning about these new topics that people like yourself is sharing, right? Because like that's a shift in their day. and then you like how watch as they propagate that outwards. And like that is another act of imagination. We were talking about imagination previously. It's about thinking through both the near term and longer term positive and negative consequences. Because it turns out, right, again, like we're really great at the hubris, the what might be, but we are way less great in being able to articulate what might go wrong.
Well, I love this. And again, so many positive comments here. I really appreciate the point around, so how is this, anything you put in the world is going to disrupt something.
Hmm.
And it's fascinating. I love that idea because sometimes, again, we can get really focused on a particular outcome or a desired future and then not recognize or do the deeper work around, okay, what are going to be the consequences of this? This is a question I'll ask in the coaching conversations I'll have. Okay, well, more. And then it's like, okay, what changes with more? What is this? If you have this market share, if you have this, you have a better title, a larger house, like, what does that mean? And it's not to judge it. I love where you're going there. These things do not happen in isolation. I think that's so powerful. And now it impacts us. There are other dominoes, as you put it.
Absolutely, right? And I think a part of that too is knowing our constraints, knowing our limits, knowing when our systems reach their limits, what a system at like a like ultimate like twitchy out of control state looks like. Um like those are things to pay attention to. Leveraging your constraints and being able to work within them like will propel us forward.
Mm. Well, and again, and another point, and there's so many comments coming through about how insightful this point is that you're making, Carissa. The other thing I really appreciate is around, as you said, we're awesome at taking credit for stuff.
Mhm. We are.
Hey, look at how amazing I am. And then we're not, and there's a question, a follow-up question, which I'm going to get to from an audience member. Uh, we are not as good at talking about the challenges, the setbacks, the failures, if you will, the missteps. And one
Hmm.
of my favorite questions in a really fabulous conversation I was a part of, where they said, okay, well, tell us what's one of your biggest successes, as you were sharing. And then it's, what did you do to contribute to that? And then the follow-up question was, what would have happened if you did nothing? And or if you weren't involved? And it was kind of this idea of, well, would the system have just kind of, was it really you, or was it, to your point, the context? This is awesome. I can't believe we're almost an hour in. It's going so quickly.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Sarah has a question and says, this is such a great conversation. In our organization, one of the things we struggle with is failure or smart failure. Any advice around how we can design our organizational practices so that we can better embrace setbacks?
I think it comes down to measurements, right?
Ah,
We live in a world that loves our metrics, right? What metrics are we using? Because the metrics that we use actually are our ethics. They
mm,
are a representation of what we value. So if you're struggling with a culture that doesn't embrace failure enough, right? Like, well, what new metrics could you add that people are, it's not just a side thing, but it ties into company performance. It ties into performance reviews of individuals, right? Because like I think like that also as a person that's very like you, Craig, very into data storytelling, etc. Like what you include in your data set is a representation of you, but also what you didn't include.
mm,
And the best way to make it matter is to pull it into what you're measuring.
mm. I love this. And yes, I'm also passionate about data informed or evidence informed decision
Hmm.
making, storytelling. What do the numbers tell us? Again, so that not it's the be all end all, they're incredibly informative and paint a picture for us. I love this. Not surprised, we've got a follow up question on metrics from Daniel saying, not sure if you can help. Any reflection questions that we should be asking in our organizations about how to design the highest quality metrics?
Whew. Well, yes. I mean,
That's
this is
it.
like one of those, like with me, again, like you're opening a whole can of worms here. Like I think high quality metrics come both from what's easy to measure and from what's not easy to measure.
Mm,
And in our organization, sometimes you'll see us use the data sets that are on hand, that are easy to access, right? That are easy to gather, that are number based.
mm,
And those aren't necessarily the best measurements of what we're trying to reach. So I would, like, as step one, like figure out it, this is different depending on your org, what you do, etc. Like one is like, is there a qualitative measure that could parallel this quantitative thing that we always gather? That
mm,
sometimes is customer stories or employee experience stories, and there's real science to how you can interpret that information and see patterns across stories and synthesize and find insight. Um, what are we like? Are oftentimes when we're building tools, new algorithms, we use stock data sets to
mhm.
train them. So like that may be more in line with where that question is going to. So let me just tee that up. It's hard. It's a lot of work to build a big robust data set, to clean it, to have it work. Like we all know that that takes a lot of work. So a lot of the new tools and algorithms that are built are grown and tested on what exists, what is stock. And that can help train, that can like make you faster to market, back to our obsession with speed, and that speed equals efficiency, which is just so flawed, right? But instead, really take a look at, if I'm using the stock data set, what biases am I embedding in it, right?
Mm,
Because those biases then get translated to, those are your biases too.
mm,
And taking a hard look as to, is that my bias, like say that out loud,
mhm.
then you can decide, like you'll have to prioritize, right? Like maybe you can't get your tool out fast enough, but maybe it's way more inclusive. And those are decisions that all of us need to wrestle with.
Well, and again, just so many positive comments coming in, and really appreciate the point, I think, and want to echo that, right? Where you say, so what's easy to measure,
Hmm.
what's not as easy to measure, and a lot of times, and I really back to again the framing of this, back to agency, back to intentionality,
Hmm.
is recognizing those things, and then and you so correctly pointed out, Carissa, about, well, we can be really, it's very attractive to take the easy to measure stuff. So hey, let's just grab that. Let's just grab that. And not ask ourselves the deeper, more penetrating question that you've posed, which is, okay, what else could I measure that's more difficult or more challenging, that's not as easy a fix, if you will? And then what are the messages that we're going to receive from that? And then I also love, so thinking of what you shared earlier as well, it was such an important point that you made about, and our bias towards, well, faster is better, almost, right? Like
Hmm.
go 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 go. And I think it's so great that you're saying, hey, like speed is not the be all end all. And so if you do slow things down, if you collect higher quality data, your application, your product, whatever you're working, whatever you're designing is more inclusive, is going to have the impact that you say you desire. I just think this is absolutely awesome. We are so, again, it's amazing that we're almost done, this conversation. It's been so fun. I've got another question from Sam, who says, really enjoyed the Name Your Monster practice. What's another favorite practice in the book for you personally? And
Mm.
what have readers told you are their favorite practices?
Thank you for asking that, because I love talking about some of these. One of my other favorites is the derive. Okay, and the derive, or if you are, it's a French word, dérive is how you should be saying it, I believe. Um, comes from the psychogeography movement in the 50s. Guy Debord had led the psychogeography movement, right? And what these psychogeographers did was they would allow a journey to take them in a city. And what that means is like they just drift. Derive means drift. So you drift your way around. Now, what that means for us practically, and what we send our students on, and what I like to do, is go outside. You're not bringing any technology other than maybe a watch or a timer to tell you I'm doing this for a half hour, I'm doing this for an hour. No interruptions, no talking. And tell yourself you're going to follow a color. So what you might do is like, oh, I see that there's this kind of like grayish color across the street, and I'm going to walk my way over to it. And then once I get to it, in my peripheral vision, like I see like the shiny gray silver on a hubcap over there, and then I walk my way to that. And then once I get there, I see this other thing and that what you follow will change, but just allow that color to take you, or that sense to take you, or whatever you're following to take you. Do not try to control it. Take that deliberate drift and see where you end up when the time goes off. And I absolutely guarantee that it's another one of those activities where you'll be like, holy cow, I had no idea that was going to shift me in such a fascinating way. Like everybody always looks at us skeptically before we like send them out in the world to do it. And they come back like, oh my God, like this. And I ended here and I ended here and I didn't know this, but then I started following the momentum and like the acceleration and things in my and like it's an inspiration giver. It's a way to see again like the everyday places that we exist in a totally new lens that you can't force. You have to allow it to happen.
No, and that's so awesome. And again, what's really interesting, and back to, and it sounds like almost like a macro thread here that we're talking about, which is that space of non-judgment as you just go out and explore and not have, and be present in that moment and be open to wherever that's going to take us. And then the opportunity that presents us, despite the awkwardness or discomfort, you talk about the importance of letting go and those kinds of things in the book, that now what it does is it almost unlocks the next level for us in ways that we could never imagine. So I think that is just so powerful, so important. Well, our time is almost up. Again, I've mentioned this.
It went fast, yeah.
It went by very fast. So I'm curious, we've covered a lot and I've got so many comments going. I wish this could continue, and this is so great. Can't wait to pick up my copy of the book. Any final thoughts that you have for listeners or leaders who are tuning in terms of how they can take powerful steps to assemble a thriving future for themselves, their families, their organizations?
Yeah, I think our take-home message in this book is to design for healing, is to design knowing that what we will create will break something. And this is if it definitely falls like right on the face of the hubris that exists in a lot of technology today, and how we need to report on ourselves. But if I can just say the quote that opened this book and was really a guiding light for Scott and I while we were writing it. This quote from Catherine Ann Porter, she wrote in 1950 in Mademoiselle magazine. So we're at the height of the era of atomic weapons. Another moment in history where it felt like technology was really overcoming, affecting the environment, affecting people. It's another fraught moment. What she said was, it may be that what we have is a world not on the verge of flying apart, but an uncreated one, still in shapeless fragments, waiting to be put together properly. And I very much feel that. We have a lot of the parts and pieces for building a better future. We have to be optimistic about it. What we envision will come to pass. use your imagination. Do not shy away from story. Everything is initially a fiction before it's a reality. So with that, like, flex those muscles and encourage them in others, and we will be able to build that agency and build the future we want.
Well, awesome. And I'll read this where someone said, awesome, very inspiring ending. Thank you so much, Carissa, for this really engaging conversation. And I'll echo that. I think what I love about the book, and again, I encourage everybody to check it out, go buy it. And it's, as I said, beautifully designed as well, very colorful, great artwork, all kinds of great things. And the content, to me, what I love is that it acknowledges the context in which we're in, as you talk about the intangibles. And then really the fundamental thrust of the book is around how we can take action.
Mm-hmm.
That through the context that we're in right now, and despite some of the challenges and even some of the fears we may have, bringing it back to that agency, that intentionality, that we are the actors, actresses in our story, and what are the steps we want to take to be able to build a better world for ourselves, our families, our communities. And I think that's such an awesome way. It's such an awesome message at such an important time. So thank you for spending the time with me today, Carissa. I knew this would be a lot of fun. It flew by so fast. Really appreciate it. For those of you who have joined live, thank you for your phenomenal questions. Those listening to the recorded episode, please like it, share it, continue to provide your suggestions. Really want to build the thesis of this book fits beautifully with the community we're looking to build, which is how can we work together to build a thriving future. So real pleasure, Carissa. Until next time, everyone, bye for now.
Thanks, Craig. Great to see all of you.